usually on their website, there is no submission like, oh, if you want to speak at our conference, here's what you need to do. Like, that's just not there.
Very, very little of
how
that.
in the world, Eric, do you find conferences to pitch at? Hello, Raiders and Crafters. I'm Valerie Isan.
And I'm Erick Mertz.
And this is episode 130 of the podcast. It's September 20th, 2023, as we record this. And today we're talking about pitching the conference circuit. Ooh. So that'll be exciting. I have questions for you.
I got questions for you, too.
So we don't have new patrons this week, but thank you so much to all of our existing patrons. It really is, it touches my heart. It's very special that you support us and that you believe in us and in the podcast. And yeah, so go on over to patreon.com/Valerie Isan and check out all the tiers. This might be my author update, but I am about ready. I want to do it this month, but I might not get to it. Changing my patron benefits up and the tiers, changing the tiers up. So I think I'm going to not have the dollar patron level anymore. That's my that's my critique that I've been getting from other people, other business people. So if you want to get in at the dollar level, I believe you can be grandfathered in, I think. Is that true? Do it now. Yeah. Anyway, you can go check out all the tiers at patreon.com/Valerie Isan, IHSAN. And I got a thing in my email inbox, I think it was yesterday, from patreon.com/Strange Air Stories.
You did?
I did. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, but you want to say anything about it?
It was just a relief to get it off my desk. I mean, that's like the most, that's the non-juiciest thing I've ever said about a story. Well, I'm going to do a video on where that story comes from. I'm behind. Look, my whole life is a little behind, if you're looking at this on YouTube, you can see there's still stacks of books and piles of stuff, so still getting there. But I just finished the novel rewrite. I just finished rewriting the book, the main book. That's off my desk. Thank goodness. Yay. And so I have room to do other things. And when I say I was relieved to get it off my desk, it was just, I hadn't put one of those Patreon stories out since early August, maybe. And so I don't know. I like the release button. I like hitting that. And I hadn't done that in a while. So, and now I have time to sort of get those other stories moving and some other things. So
yeah, that's my author update too, basically. Right. You can hear it's echoey in here because there is nothing in here save a empty bookcase and a plant. I can see a plant. Yeah, there's a plant, and so it's all my stuff is still in the backyard. So it's going to come in today.
You're listening to this and live in the area. Val needs a hand getting everything inside. That's
Ali will help me, but yeah, it rained last night, which we were really upset about because the weather app said it wasn't going to, and we were going to move everything in today. So I woke up to wet stuff in the backyard. So I'm a little bit crunchy about that, but that's all right. My bad. Okay. So yeah, my floors and just trying to get everything. We ripped up carpets and, moved furniture, and yeah, it's been a really long week. And I got stung by a bee on Friday, and I'm still not on my finger, and it still hurts. It's bad. It was terrible. I've been stung before. I've been stung by hornets and yellow jackets and bees. I've stepped on bees,
Sure.
It's part of growing up in the Pacific Northwest or wherever, but this was the most painful sting I have ever had in my entire life. It's actually the most painful thing I've ever experienced. For 4 hours straight, I was writhing.
Worse than childbirth.
Worse than childbirth. It was so terrible.
This bee, like we got to find this bee and get this bee on the show and talk about like what
it died. Like it's, I had to get the stinger out, so I knew it was just a honeybee, but I think he must have just like hit a nerve or something.
He had a really bad day, and he
was terrible.
Going out in glory. This guy, this bee.
So that has actually stopped me from working.
Oh my gosh.
Terrible. It was so bad.
I'm going to remember this years from now when somebody says like something about like what stopped me from working, and I'm just like, bee sting on the finger maybe did it to you. I get that.
Terrible. It's still discolored and swollen, and that was Friday. That was almost a week ago. It was a weird reaction, very weird reaction. But yeah, that completely. I had a lot of empathy for my fellow humans that suffer chronic pain or illness. Like this was. I've never had a migraine. Maybe I've had one in my life, but I don't know what they feel like. But I know that they are debilitating and just out of nowhere. So all of a sudden you wake up and okay, there's 3 days gone from my week. So I had great empathy, realizing, wow, nothing that I had planned for Friday was going to happen. I was just in bed.
Now that you put it this way, I feel bad for laughing about it. Now we need to rewind and let me. I feel terrible because now you're putting it to like something I can. Like,
no, that's what I was thinking while I was, in bed, like, oh, okay, well.
With your hand raised with ice.
I was trying to like prop it on pillows.
Soothing music.
I was trying to watch Netflix just on my iPad, trying to like, it was terrible. It was unexpected too. I was like, oh crap, I got stung by a bee. And yeah. It was not.
When my son got stung by a bee for the first time, I just have to tell this story. He shouted like, somebody call 911.
It was so painful.
Maybe these bees are getting like, maybe they have more of an agenda now. Maybe there's something we're not getting.
Maybe. I don't know. But it was terrible. Okay. So I am, because of all of this chaos, still reading the same 2 books that I was reading before. And I'm also, I'm actually beta reading for an author friend of mine who wrote a memoir. So I'm beta reading her memoir.
Cool.
So I still count those as books read. I put that in my planner, man.
Of course.
It's a whole book. So I read it. Yeah. Just because it's not published doesn't mean it's not a book. So I definitely count that. So I'm reading
It will be. It will be.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah. What are you reading?
I'm still working on In the Woods.
In the Woods.
It just haven't had as much read. Like there's still like things being put away in the house, know? So
I totally get it.
I'm finding a lot, like everything's backing up a little. It's just, but I think we're coming clear of that now. So I will, and I've got a trip to Alaska, which we'll talk about in the conference part of this. Yes. So I'm like, I have to be like, I have books I want to read. Like I always plan my book when I'm traveling. So I can't be bringing the book I'm almost finished with when I go. So
man, so one of my other author updates, I guess, is that so I'm back at the bookstore 1 day a week. Did I tell you this last week?
Yes, you did.
Okay. So and then we're starting to head into the Christmas season, the holiday season, where it gets really super busy. So I am filling in a couple of days a week for the next 3 months. So that is going to take some of my writing time away, but, and reading time and all that. But I, have this new idea for a novel that I got at the retreat. And so while I was at work yesterday at the bookstore, I bought some books and I'm super excited to read them. And so, yes, I'm in the same place. Like I got to finish this novel so that I can read these other books that are research for the novel that I want to write. So yeah, I'm chomping at the bit. Those are definitely going to jump the stack. It could jump the shark too. I don't know. I haven't read it yet.
I feel this. I feel like I had this nice reading rhythm going for a little while there. And then, look, life happens. So yeah.
I'm going to dedicate tonight to reading though. I've decided I'm going to sit in the hot tub and I'm going to read after moving some furniture.
And I think fall is also the time that a lot of the bookish people I know sort of like the book, you go from that like beachy read that we do in the summertime, or that sort of the lighter stuff. I don't know. This is the time of the year. The next 6 months are the like, give me the dark gothic, give me those books. This is that time of year. It's starting to smell like Stephen King out there. It's starting to feel like Lovecraft in the air. It's like my book mood changes. So I find myself like, if I don't finish like what I wanted to read in one season, bleeding over into the other, then I slow down because it's just not fitting with my feeling vibe out there,
yeah.
the reading vibe.
Do you sometimes just check the book then? Or like save it for next summer? Or whatever,
I do list reorganization all the time. Like I will look at the stack by my bed and say, okay, you wanted to read this.
But I mean, if you're in the middle of a book and you're like, oh, I really want to read this other one because, it's October. Do you just
I will toss a book if the
away?
book just ceases to work for me. It's never that trigger doesn't come.
I see.
But if I got to this place and I just said, you know what, I'm in my mid 20s and 30s, I finished books that I didn't like on principle. But in my mid 40s, I'm sorry, if the book isn't working, 100 pages in, I'm not going to write a scathing review. Actually, when I write reviews on Goodreads for books that I don't finish, I am more diplomatic because I will always just qualify why I didn't finish it. But I don't I don't say like, well, this is a 1-star book because I didn't finish it. Unless it was a 1-star book that I didn't finish. For the most part, it's just the mood didn't hit me right. I needed something light and I was reading something dense, or vice versa.
Right.
So I don't hold the book to that. That's not why someone else. I always feel like reviews are caution or encouragement for future readers, and that shouldn't deter someone. I don't think that I didn't finish it. But I didn't finish it. I'm not that guy.
All right. So I have questions about.
Let's talk about, first off, writing conferences. What are they? Why do you want to go to one? There's probably some people that don't go or haven't gone, right? So we met at a writers conference, didn't we?
That's true. We did.
Yeah.
So it's great for networking and making new writer friends. And we've known each other for so long. We've worked with each other. We've worked for each other. We worked with each other. We've
done everything.
We've
like, you have stories together, I'm sure, about me that I've forgotten, and vice versa. Like that's that kind of nicknames that have come and gone.
Yeah. I don't remember you nicknaming me.
You meet a lot of, I think you called me Maverick.
I called you that, but I don't think you've nicknamed me.
I don't remember why, but
you did. Right.
Well, we got to work on that. Well, your name lends itself to a nickname. I mean, you're Val.
Okay.
Come on, Val. Like writers conferences are, if you want to meet people, I think there's when I started going to conferences or thinking about going to conferences, the podcast world wasn't so abundant. So I guess a lot of people get their education through the podcast world. I think the podcast world gives me a lot of my information, but I still think there's a lot to be gained by going into a classroom, whether that be at a school or a conference center, and just sitting down across the room from someone and listening. I still think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. In-person education is a totally different vibe than like an online one or textbook or podcast or YouTube, any of that. But I hadn't really thought about that. I had stopped kind of going, well, the pandemic stopped me going from conferences, but and I have been to 2 or 3 online conferences, but they're pretty specific to, like, this one's just geared toward publishing with your strengths, or this one's just geared to, marketing in this new publishing industry, or, something like that. Whereas a writing conference that is organizational led is more, I don't want to say generic, but it supplies information. It's broader. Yeah. And
I also think it's valuable as a new writer, whatever you're choosing to do, is to see the business it's part of the business of writing. It's conference, and almost every industry has like a conference circuit, a conference cycle that happens, that where people in the industry meet each other. And I think for me, going to the Willamette Writers for the first time and really volunteering with Willamette Writers for the first time, I saw that, you know, what it takes to all those books you see on the tables, what it takes to get those books into the conference, what it means to the author, what it means to the conference, economically, everything. I got to see like how the business of that person's an editor, that person's a manager, they're talking, they have a relationship, getting in on those relationships. I think I don't want to call it a shortcut, because shortcut comes with a negative connection, but like it really does hasten your process of moving in the business, because when you call someone you know and say, hey, I've got something you might be interested in, they know you and will say, or more likely to say yes, than just submitting blindly to, you know, an open call to submissions. It's just that the people you meet, it's invaluable. In my mind.
Yeah, connections are important in any business and industry, and this is no different.
I think we lose sight of that too with digital stuff. It's being so easy to podcast, to Zoom, to group chat, all that stuff. There is just something about being in the same space as someone, sitting at the dinner table with them or the lunch table in that moment. It's just different. I think you just make a deeper connection. But
well,
maybe
also,
I'm
and
old.
you end up talking about stuff that you didn't know you were interested in, or you hadn't thought of, you know, like if you're looking for something on a podcast or YouTube channel specifically to learn about XYZ, or, you know, you're not going to get the information that you might get sitting at that lunch table with the author from Florida that writes in a genre that you don't read in, and now has given you some like vital information that you were like, oh my God, I never thought of that, you know, and it helps you in your business. Like that you can't get from a podcast. Or maybe you
I'm
can,
100%
but you know what I
into
mean?
that.
Yeah.
I'm 100% into that. Like, I think that when everything's tailored to what you want, there's no accidental, incidental learning. You know, like it's like the way we get our books and music and things fed to us, right? The algorithm knows what you like, so it's only going to show you what you like. Whereas before, you might browse and find something like, oh, this looks interesting, I'll try this. When I go to conferences, I go to I don't look at the like intermediate, beginner, advanced stuff. Partly because sometimes it's just nice to sit in a class and hear somebody talk about story structure 101. You know, it's just fun to be like, okay, like let's just and I can see you kind of, you know, doing that thing. It's just sometimes nice to sit there and go, right, inciting incident, right, character development.
Yeah, it's always good to review and like re-look at stuff that you thought you knew everything about.
Right. I think it reinvigorates when I have my process for thinking about those things, like how when I'm writing something, coming up with something new, like this is how I integrate those ideas. But when I feel like when I sit with someone else and I'm taking that class that again, I don't want to say beneath me, but it's definitely in my skill set. I just find it like it reinvigorates it, like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, at the end of the day, you're still talking shop with authors, which is fabulous. And which is why I like going to conferences. So as someone who knows stuff,
I know a little bit.
You know, you can teach this stuff.
You can.
Yeah. And if you do have an author business and you want a side gig, you know, you're not going to maybe make a living with the royalties off of your books that you're publishing. So you're doing something else too, editing or teaching or, you know, anything like that. So one of those things that you can do is hop on that conference cycle that you started talking about and start pitching workshops and master classes to the conferences. So that's what I have started doing. I mean, I kind of have been dabbling over the last couple of years, I have pitched one conference that I never seem to get into. So I might check it in later, but now that yeah,
Hence
I
why you
guess I
keep
don't know
pitching it,
why
because you don't get in yet.
what's that?
Well, I'm saying that's why you keep pitching them, because they're not letting you in. You're like, why won't you let me
Basically,
in?
I'm like, this has become, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so the way I started, so I have 3 conferences that I am speaking at this fall. I just finished one. I have another one next month and another one in November. So the way I got on that is knowing somebody who knew somebody who had been in the, so this is all that networking again.
Right.
So
Because
I
those people are
talked with,
doing things while you're doing things. And when
yeah. So
yeah.
what I personally did to get on these 3 conferences was talk to an author friend that I knew had spoken at conferences.
Stupid verbs.
I know those conjugations are terrible. And she gave me the contact name and email of the people that she had dealt with when she spoke at those conferences. And so I emailed them directly and said, hey, these are some, so-and-so said this was a great conference to work for. I am really looking forward to meeting you. Here's my bio. These are the 2 classes that I'm pitching, this time around, and what I can teach for what I can bring to your conference. And that started the conversation. That wasn't the official pitching. I mean, it is.
Right.
That was kind of like a queer letter, if you will. But I guess the challenge for me in pitching conferences is, first of all, knowing what the deadline is, because usually on their website, there is no submission like, oh, if you want to speak at our conference, here's what you need to do. Like, that's just not there.
Very,
so
very little
how
of that.
in the world, Eric, do you find conferences to pitch at? Because now I've got the bug, man. Like, I'm going to keep pitching these
I'm full on bug,
conferences because now I've got my in. And now I've got, something I can put on my resume too. So maybe I can repitch this one that never lets me in, and say, see, 3 other places I've gone to, maybe now.
So this year I'll have, and I got the bug right before COVID. And my little sad story is that I was accepted to teach at the Alaska Writers Guild conference in 2020, and then COVID hit, and then there was no Alaska Writers Guild conference. I'm teaching at the Alaska Writers Guild conference next week in Anchorage. And I also taught at the Cedar Mill Writers Group in July. And those are 2 different conferences, and they're very different ways that I got them. The Cedar Mill thing, the woman who runs the Cedar Mill Writers Group, well, if you're in the Beaverton area or any of the west side of the Portland metro, the Cedar Mill Writers Group is fantastic. They do online and in-person conferences using the library, little just like mini sessions, mini tutorials. They do an anthology. They have a writers group. It's a great community. If you're over there, do it. That's my pitch
for them. That was Beaverton?
Yeah, they meet at the library in Cedar Mill, which is a neighborhood in Beaverton. And they run like just a really well put together writers organization. The woman who runs that organization contacted me off my site. She just said, hey, I look for writers in Portland. You look like someone who could teach something. What would you like to teach? And so I pitched her the one class that I had developed at that time. And then I ended up teaching that. And they loved it. And then contacted me 1 year later to say, hey, what else do you have? And I had been working on a class, and I said, oh, I'll teach this. And they said, great. And I taught it. Now, one of the things that they didn't pay me, they let me pitch my books. They let me use the material on my website, which is, which is worthwhile. The lack of money is one thing. Like, they don't pay, but they give you a line item on your resume. And I say that because a lot of the conferences will ask you, have you taught this course before? If you say no, I'm imagining that that's a little bit of a turnoff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I find conferences. It has been a kind of a just stab at the Google search. My strategy is West Coast United States. I decided to omit California for the most part and just go with, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, out from, Montana, Dakotas, that kind of thing. So like basically the kind of middle mountain to the West Coast. I chose that because I feel like once you start getting into that East Coast Writers Conference circuit, you're looking at more of the MFAs, you're looking at more of the college, you're looking at the traditionally published. I just made this, like when I looked at who was teaching at the more West Coast conferences, it felt like it was more, you're not going to get a keynote as an independent. You're not going to get you're not going to get like a plum, main course, highlighting course. But if you're going to start working your way up, I thought it was just the best way to do it.
Yeah. That's
so what
strategy.
I did was
pick a region.
I just picked the region. I went state by state and just Googled state and the Writers Conference. And I created a spreadsheet, which basically, here's all the conferences in Washington. Here's when they are, where they are, who runs the conference. And you're right. There was not a lot of like, hey, we want pitches by this time. A lot of what I've seen is that the conference director sort of holds the conference schedule. And I've seen it with Willamette Writers. I mean, Kate Ristow runs like the whole thing, and there's nobody else you could really contact in that organization if you wanted to get in on the conference other than her. And I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you have to find the person on the website who is the keeper of that sort of conference organization responsibility. And that's what I've done. And I always send this sort of email that's like, hey, I'm a local writer, editor. Here's what I do. I'm looking for conferences in the area. Tell me about yours. And people will give you all of the information that you need. It's not like other emails that you'll send out where you'll get that California no, like where you send out an email and nobody responds to you. I have not experienced that. Conference directors will send back the variety of responses and the variety of submissions that they need. For example,
wait, I need to go back.
Pause.
So you said you contact them with a query letter that just says that you are a speaker and you're looking.
I teach these things.
And I'm looking for
opportunities.
Can you tell me about your conference?
Yeah.
So you leave an open-ended question. You're not just saying, hey, I can speak at your conference.
No, so as a sideline, I'm working on a project about empathy in business. And one of the ways to almost guarantee a response from somebody is to ask them for help. So I always make it about like, can you help me figure this out?
Okay. Ask them for help.
And even if it's a no, that person's like, oh, I'm sorry, our 2024 conference is all full up. But I'll send you an email. I'll put you in the RFP email for 2025. Even if it's a no, you'll get this. You just get a step further. So yeah, make it a help request. And I put that out to like before I moved, I submitted to, I have a little list here, a second conference in Alaska, the Pike Place Writers Group in Denver. I submitted to now I'm losing my list, a conference in North Dakota and a conference in Idaho. And I did all of that. They all asked for something different. Pike Place said, hey, we're on submittable. The more classes you can teach, the more likely you are to get in, because we pay for travel and lodging.
Okay.
So if they're going to fly you out, they want you for 3 classes instead of 1. The guy that I spoke with from Idaho, his name was Mike, super nice guy. It was all very personal, just like it was this email exchange about what I wanted to talk about and what they needed specifically at their conference. That's another way I've followed up my questions. Well, like, what does your audience need? Because every conference gets feedback. like, hey, what was good this year? What was bad? Like I've now incorporated that too. What did this year's attendees say they needed?
Mm-hmm.
Because if that person said, hey, we really need this class, I will figure out a way to get that class.
Right? Yeah. I can teach anything you need.
Yeah. So I think that like conferences are, having worked as the chair of a conference for a year, I realized that a lot of it, conferences gain momentum. You know, it's an idea. It's an idea that becomes a date on a calendar that has no momentum until it has all of the momentum. So being a part, just, I think you have to figure out a way to, there's nothing set in stone. I haven't seen a conference yet that does, we only do this year. So if they need something, if you have something, you're in that space that they like, if you're teaching something that's generally desired by an audience, if you're not teaching something so niche that nobody wants it, there's a place for you on the schedule. And I just think it's a matter of, it's a numbers game. You know, I think I submitted to 5. I'll probably get into 1 or 2. So the next time I'll submit to 10. So I get into 3 or 4, you know, it becomes that game.
Right. So I also wanted to touch on the timing, like if you're submitting an article to a magazine and you want it to be relevant at the time that they're publishing it, they've got an editorial calendar. So like, they're receiving pitches for like Christmas articles in June or something, like it needs 6 months or something of lead time. Conferences have the same thing, they have to have their schedule like locked in ish.
Right. Before they start putting out the advertising and everything.
Right. For the registration and such. So, there's a lot of summer writing conferences. There's kind of a summer season of writing conferences. And so pitching your ideas would have to be, like January.
So I noticed that, like right now I was targeting contacts with writers conferences that were in like April, May, June, knowing that they were, because I think what happens is that the conference, let's say the conference happens on October 1st. Let's just like this conference that I'm going to, right? The Alaska Writers Guild. The conference is going to happen. There's going to be the month where everybody says, do we really ever need to do this again? This was so stressful. Then they'll all remember the joy of it. I think there's like a 3-month, 10 weeks to 3-month like hangover after the conference where nobody's planning anything. And I remember that with the Willamette Writers. They run in the beginning of August. We started talking about the conference in November, a little bit more in December, and then that momentum really started to pick up in the new year. So I think if you're looking at conferences to go to, you need to be that far ahead too, because usually there's the early bird discounts, and you want to, if you can pay $200 instead of $400, then do that. But I think, if you're looking at, like right now, when I start this again in October, I'll probably start looking at conferences in June, July. And that's where the bulk of them are. That's the meat and potatoes of your conference schedule.
Say that last part again.
I think that June, July, August, May through September, that's, I think, your big conference season. That's when everybody's
right. And so you're wanting to start pitching to them, in January. Probably.
Yeah. I think next month I'm going to start hitting the June and July folks and just starting that question.
Okay.
Again, because I'm not going to be the speaker that gets the head of the ad. I'm not the speaker that's going to get the keynote thing. So they're looking to fill in their schedule with people like me. I know, be realistic about who you are. And so I'm not driving the thing, but I can help them like fill the schedule in. That's probably the place they're in. They're probably, the June conference is probably already looking for or found their keynote speaker and their main advertising push speaker. So the rest of us just get in line.
And these later fall conferences too. I started pitching like in around April, I think. April, May is when I started pitching. And I heard back in the early summer about the first one, getting in, but the November one, I figured that they, wrote me off. Like I just didn't make the cut
You were
because I
probably a
wasn't
little
hearing
late.
anything. But then they contacted me in like August or something, or like
Oh, wow.
the end of July. It was like, hey, we'd love to have you. So it was kind of like, I probably was like a last minute ad, like you said, like there was a hole that needed to be filled and this one looked good enough.
Or somebody
You know?
dropped out, and you
Right.
were on the wait list. Yeah.
So that was kind of a last minute surprise. But yeah, so okay, so pitch in January for late summer conferences. June conferences can maybe get in like you said, late fall or
Yeah.
early winter. And basically, or just use the 3-month hangover rule.
Yeah. Look at when the conference is.
Mm-hmm.
And then assume that 3 months after that, 2 to 3 months after that, they're starting to look at
What's our theme for next year? And
yeah, what are we going to do? Are we going to do it this, they're still troubleshooting. If they're a good conference, they're probably reading all the feedback they got and deciding what to do. And then I think what starts to happen, just like with anything else, is like I want to teach at this conference in Homer, Alaska, which is south of Anchorage, just because partly because I just want to go to Homer, Alaska. It's supposed to be really beautiful. But the person who runs that conference is going to be at the Alaska Writers Guild conference next week.
Oh,
Guess who I'm going to go talk
networking.
to? So that's how
Yeah.
I just think there's all those opportunities. Like I think there comes a point, just like with anything else, where the more relationships you build, the more offer of help that you can, when you're making about an offer of help, they might come solicit you. I think that's just eventually what happens, right? When you create that relationship, just like that woman from Cedar Mill, she said, hey, you were great. You want to come back?
Mm-hmm.
A regular gig, a regular time to do something, even if it's not a paid gig. That's I think the thing that if you're going to do this, get out of your head, even if you're going just as an attendee, get out of your head this idea that you're going to hit the home run and like sell the book at the conference and walk out of there with an advance. I think there's this like home run mentality in the business of art that we're programmed to have. Like it's actually not like that. I don't think it really is. I think it's just about making relationships and knowing that those relationships will eventually coalesce in more and better things for you and more and better things for them. And I don't know. I just don't think that like going at it, like, I think if you're going to teach, you can't look at it and say, well, they're not paying me enough money. I'm not going to do that. Like it's your first conference, take the $150 or whatever,
Yeah.
or the free trip and like it and
Mm-hmm.
put the line item on your thing and shoot for something more.
Yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah, I was just going to say, let's transition into payment before we go. But it sounds like we've kind of already touched on that. It ranges anywhere from nothing, which actually
nothing.
is a line item on your resume. So it's not nothing.
It's not nothing.
Yeah, so you get
But you
experience.
can't do that forever. Also, you have to be realistic that unless you have unlimited capital, if you're going to spend an entire weekend doing something and traveling to do it, you have to at least make your money back or break even.
So sometimes you will get like they call it an honorarium or something, honorary payment, where they're like, dude, I know this is like nothing, but here's $60, like just to maybe that's all their nonprofit organization can afford. That's what they've budgeted, whatever. But so they'll kick you something up. And then other times they do pay I don't want to say living wage, but like, they'll pay you substantially for an hour of your time. So if you're doing a 3-hour masterclass, and that can add up to a nice little check. And then sometimes if you are driving in from out of town or flying in from out of town, they will add lodging.
Right.
I'm doing one conference this fall that didn't throw in the lodging, but their payment was much higher.
Right.
So it ends up kind of working out the same.
Yeah.
And some
I
will
don't mind.
some will even pay like mileage too,
Yep.
if you want to go that route as well.
And I don't mind saying that the Alaska conference doesn't pay that much, and I'm paying my way up there and to stay there. Part of that comes from like I've never been to Anchorage and I want to see the city, and so I'm taking this sort of like a tax deductible trip that I've wanted to take, and that's fine. However, if you are looking at, I can't do that every weekend. I can probably do that once or twice a year if I want to. And maybe. So I will, yeah, right, maybe. But I'll start to weigh conference decisions based on that. And I think it's a legitimate question to ask. Most of the directors that I've spoken to, they put it right there in that open, like I said, when I reached out to the Pike's Place Writers Group, they said, pitch as many conference classes as you can because we pay for travel and lodging. Like hint, hint. The more you do, the more worth you are to us.
Yeah.
And a lot of the conferences, like the Alaska Writers Guild, and it's not for nothing, says we'll give you admission to the rest of the conference. You're teaching on Friday morning.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
So that's worth money.
That is totally worth money.
So yeah, do it, folks. Go to conference. If you've never been, go. It's important. And if you're at that place where you feel like you have something to teach, give it a pitch.
Awesome. And I really like your spreadsheet idea, or collecting that information.
You love checklists and spreadsheets.
Actually, I don't really like making spreadsheets, but I don't mind looking at them. I hate
Excel. Anything Excel-like can go somewhere dark and hot. And yet
you chose to make a spreadsheet for this. That's
because I needed something that I could just scroll. I mean, I couldn't. And I had this thought, actually. I had this thought when I was working on the spreadsheet a few weeks ago. I was thinking, like, Valerie and I met at a conference in our home state. What would be the odds of like us being on the faculty of like some conference in, Minnesota sometime? Like, awesome. It could happen.
Yeah, that'd be rad. Well, so I would have to pitch all the same conferences that you pitch, so that we can make that happen.
Right. And I say the Minnesota one because they're very nice people and they're on my list. So
okay.
I'll be pitching you if you're listening to this.
Awesome. All right. Well, our time is up. So I think we have to stop talking about this. I'm sure I'll have other questions for you too. We have to stop talking. We've run out of time.
We have run out of time. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, people.
Oh, how funny. All right. Well, thanks so much for talking with me about this today, Eric.
My pleasure. What a pleasure.
Yeah. And I'll see you next week.
See you soon.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.